So we're going to talk about whether or not there's going to be marriage in heaven. So let's get into it. And before we get started in today's video, let me know in the comment section below. Do you think there should be marriage in heaven, or do you think there shouldn't be marriage in heaven? Let me know in the comment section below, and we can take the conversation further. So we got this comment on one of our videos, and it turned into pretty much a conversation, just going back and forth, discussing different things. Now, the conversation was actually quite interesting, and the points that he actually made were, in all honesty, points that I've thought about in different times in the past as well. About, well, I'm currently married. Obviously, I love my wife, all of those different kind of things. And yeah, at some point, we're going to go to heaven and our marriage is going to be over, so to speak. Okay. So I can understand and empathize with what the comment was actually saying. So a couple of things we discussed in this text. Okay. I'll take it from the book of Genesis. And the first thing we highlighted was from chapter 2. What you need to identify is you need to think about why God created marriage in the first place. Okay, so in chapter 2 of Genesis and verse 18, we see God saying that it's not good, okay, that man is alone. Okay, so one of the reasons, the clear reasons we see from the book of Genesis in chapter 2 that God made, one of the reasons why God made marriage is for companionship. Another thing we see in regards to marriage is taken from chapter 1, verse 28, is, what does God say? He says, be fruitful and multiply. Okay? So another reason God created marriage was for procreation. So if a man and a woman that are gonna die, okay, but have been told to be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over it, don't have any kids, then what's gonna happen to the earth? Okay, you're not gonna be able to continually replenish it, subdue it, and have dominion over it. Okay, that's why procreation is a vital component to civilization. That's why it's another reason why God created marriage in the first place. Okay, so when you think about these two reasons, these are probably the two main reasons you see in Scripture. Okay, think about now when we get to heaven. When we're in heaven, okay, we are no longer alone. Okay, so we're not going to need that kind of companionship anymore. Okay, also when we're in heaven, okay, we won't die. Okay, we go into eternity and we become eternal. So procreation no longer becomes a necessity. Okay, based on a point I just made initially. Okay, because we're not going to die. Okay, at that point, we no longer need to procreate in order to continue to keep the line going, to continue to keep mankind flourishing and replenishing the earth. That's not going to be needed anymore because we're going to be eternal. So we're never going to die. We're always going to be able to be there, hence no more procreation. And considering we're not going to need companionship in that regard anymore, okay, we don't need marriage anymore. And just to give you some more scriptural context, I don't want it to seem like I'm just talking out of my bottom, okay, and just making these things up. Let me give you some scripture references now, which are really beneficial, okay? So in regards to procreation, companionship, and eternity, I advise you look at Matthew 22, verse 23 to 30, Mark 12, verse 18 to 25. And the key verse I recommend in regards to this topic is Luke 20, verse 27 to 36. And I'm going to read a couple verses anyway in a second. But these three all say the same thing. It's when the Sadducees come and they give Jesus this abstract example about who's going to be married to who in heaven. Okay. And the reason I pinpointed Luke's account of it is because it gives some really insightful verses that I want to cover towards the end. Okay, so let's read it quickly. And it says, verse 35 says, but they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain that world and the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. So it's basically obviously telling us that there's no marriage in heaven. Okay, why is this this so specific? 36. Neither can they die anymore. Okay? They don't marry, they don't die anymore, so they're eternal. And what else does it say? For they are equal unto the angels, and are the children of God, being the children of the resurrection. So what did Jesus say here? Okay? And then again, I advise you read all three accounts, okay? But Luke 20, 27 to 36 especially. He says, those that are worthy to obtain, okay, that status in heaven, to get to that place, okay, they don't die anymore, okay? They're eternal. And like the angels that are in heaven, they're not given in marriage, okay? And it goes back to the point of angels in heaven don't need to procreate because they're eternal. And they don't need companionship anymore, as in a husband or a wife or anything like that, because we're going to be there with the Lord, okay? And we're no longer going to need those sort of desires or relationships in order to fulfill us or sustain us. Now, in that common conversation I alluded to at the start of this video, a really good point was raised, okay? And he basically raised the point. He said, hold on, okay? But God said to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion before man sinned. So if you don't understand why that's significant, because before man sinned, okay, Adam and Eve were eternal, okay? They weren't going to die, okay? But the moment they ate that fruit, obviously the wages of sin brings death, as it says in Romans chapter 6:23. So they were no longer eternal creations, okay? But they were now able to die, okay? And it talks about how after they sinned, then they started having children, etc. And a couple of things to identify ultimately anyways, yes, okay, they were eternal at that point and having companionship. And they didn't procreate at that time. And it was only after, when they had sinned, that they began to procreate. And that goes back to the point I was saying earlier on about how when you're trying to subdue the world and to have dominion over it, if you die and you have no offspring, then mankind becomes extinct. Okay? So it is a good point nonetheless. So this is the key thing, and I'm going to put it up here, as in before we get to heaven. Okay? Although God said, be fruitful and multiply, before they committed sin, okay, you can't ignore that sin was to come, okay? God knows everything, okay? And God knew, even though he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, even though they were in an eternal state at that point and hadn't sinned, so they weren't going to die, God knew that sin was going to come. So it made sense at that point anyway. The difference in heaven, based on when we get to heaven, is sin will be no more. So this is the difference. Before man sinned, God could say, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, because God knew they were going to sin, okay? The difference is when you get to heaven, there is no more sin, okay? Sin is no more. So that's the key difference. So this basically just gives you some context about why there will be no marriage in heaven. Okay, the two main reasons God created marriage in the first place were companionship and procreation. When we get to heaven, we will no longer need companionship and we're not going to die anymore because we're eternal. So we'll no longer need to procreate. So make sure you remember these verses here. And if you want help actually learning how to memorize Bible verses, I'm going to put a video right here that I recommend you watch next after this video, because it's going to show you exactly how to memorize Bible verses for yourself. Thanks and take care.